Thank you for joining me for another story from a Hometown Scrapbook by Ben Weatherwax, radio transcripts from the 1950s. This one's called The Wedding Cake. Hello there. We told you once about 5 Hoquiam girls who produced a minor revolution in Grays Harbor County back in 1904 when they refused to submit to a study of botany when they wanted to study mathematics. They were rather independent young ladies, as it turned out, and their case made the story that a lot of our listeners got quite a chuckle out of. I know they did, because some of them called me to tell me what a good story they thought it made, and to add a bit or a piece that I missed in collecting the facts. And one of the calls from an anonymous woman told me to dig around for another story concerning the same 5 young ladies. She told me that the essential details of the story and left me on my own to find out the rest and put it together. She predicted that I would find a most interesting yarn there, and I can honestly say her prediction was modest, for the research uncovered a story that is one of the most remarkable and colorful of all yarns that have been gathered for this, the Hometown Scrapbook. It's a story of romance, the incurable, happy-spirited romance that springs eternal in young people, and a pact made by 8 young ladies still in high school. A story of its remarkable turns and what the shaping of nearly half a century has done to give this incident a perspective. And there's a heartwarming truth about this story that I want to share with you tonight. So when George Edgar has taken his customary few seconds for our sponsor, I'll tell you the yarn of the wedding cake. And 8 young and romantic ladies, several of whom are listening as I open this scrapbook tonight to tell you their interesting story. But first, here's George for a word from our sponsor. This is a story about 8 young ladies, very romantic and impressionable young ladies who attended Hoquiam High School in the year of 1904. As students, I strongly suspect they were above average, for they are above average today, at least those whom I've had the good fortune to know. But as young ladies possessed of the interest and whims of young ladies of 1904, they were even more remarkable, not perhaps so much as individuals, but certainly as a group. You see, there was Annabelle Richardson, John's daughter. There was Phoebe Parker, the daughter of Jim Parker, the Arenarian. There was Henry Stevenson's daughters, Lael. Henry was in lumber, Orly Whitney's daughter, Mabel, and Jim Lenski's daughter, Susie. There was Ola Hall, she was Christian Hall's daughter, and Fred Dawes' daughter, Bessie. And there was Ida Annis. It was hardly a club, although they planned many of their activities together. It was a group, not greatly different from any other group of high school girls today, compatible with mutual interest and a liking for the same things. They often got together for an evening at one of the girls' homes and planned some things, or told their hopes and ambitions, or just talked. Yes, not much different than that of high school girls today in the 1950s. That was the way that they happened to get together during the Christmas holiday in 1903. The gaiety of the holiday, the milestones of another new year coming soon, all reminded them that they were a year older. And then one of the girls repeated the story she had read in the magazine that month. It was about a group of girls in the East who had gotten together to make a wedding cake. Each had contributed something to the cake, and it was to be put away to be given to the first girl to be married. It was a romantic idea, they all agreed. In fact, it was the most romantic idea they could have had at that time. Now, you know how much things are. The common procedure is to agree that it's an excellent idea and something should be done about it, and then promptly to forget it. But not as we noted. This was an exceptional group of young ladies, and they laid their plans. Each would provide some of the ingredients, each would have a hand in making, each would put something of their own into it, the traditional penny, the thimble, the ring. All the little necessities would be included. It would be the finest, biggest, loveliest cake ever made, and the first one to walk down the altar with the man of her choice would cut their cake at her wedding. It was January 1st, 1904, when they met to make the cake. The old year of 1903 had gone out. Hoquiam's plank streets were littered with the remnants of the midnight merrymaking when the 8 girls gathered, with their bowls of citrus and nuts, packages of sugar and flour, all the essentials that must go into a cake to make it the most elegant and most beautiful cake that they ever put together. It would be 3 tiers high. The large first layer, then a smaller one, then a little crowning layer, and then frosted with expertise and the ingenuity of 8 young ladies. It was not the product of a single day. No, there were a few details to clear up the next day, but finally it was complete and put away in a great box and many wrappings. And the 8 young ladies shared their secret, and each hoped it would be she that would cut the cake. Who would win the lovely prize and the handsome husband too? And the years ticked off. The Grays Harbor calendar. Aberdeen, leveled by fire, began to rebuild. The little wooden towns grew and prospered till 1907, then slumped into a weak lumber market of that year. And then came July of 1908. That spring, Annabelle Richardson had been taking more than average interest in tall Dick Walker. Dick was one of the 4 Walker brothers. Herm, Jerry, and John were the other 3. And early that summer she announced her engagement to Dick. It was to be the event of July 29th. Hers was to be the first wedding. There had been a clause in the agreement between the girls to win the cake. The girl being married must invite all the others to her wedding. And they were invited, and all present that day in July in 1908 when Annabelle and Dick Walker cut the cake. It had been in safekeeping for 4 long years, but everyone remarked on its texture and goodness, and the 7, for there were now 7, wished Annabelle a long life with the greatest of happiness, and then perhaps you've guessed it. Then they hurried over to Ola Hall's house on K Street and began to make another cake. They had prepared it. Each brought something and began to make another cake. Bess the sugar and some eggs, Leah the citron, Ida the nuts. Each had some ingredient, and again they worked as a team to build the 3 gorgeous layers of another cake, a cake that would be the most important cake in the world for one of them. And when it was finished, gleaming with sugary coating and elegance with the trimming, it went into safekeeping, the safest of keeping, to wait the day when it would be claimed again. Then came those years again, when Leo Stevenson was married to Gaylord Adams. It was quietly accomplished in Portland, and there was no cake and no formalities. Leo forfeited her cake. Ida Annis married Earl Whalen, without the girls of the big wedding, and only her relatives were awarded of it until the event was all over. It was in the autumn of 1912 before the girls brought the second cake out of its hiding place, and Mabel Whitney had won the mountainous pastry. Mabel and Manville Anderson had set their date of their wedding for September 24th. Another 4 years had rolled past, but the cake that Mabel cut that autumn day was equally as fine as the first, and all 8 agreed that there must surely be another cake. Bess Dawes was attending school in Tacoma at the College of Puget Sound that fall, and the girls didn't want to make the cake without Bess. So the cake making was postponed until the Christmas holiday, and it was on the 3rd of January 1913 that they all met at Lyle Adams' house over on Eckland Avenue to make their cake. And again, they repeated their procedure, each providing it with an ingredient, each participating in the work. It was a routine now, and they put a great, lovely, sugary pile together like a well-drilled team. And early in January, they put that cake away. They were sure that this one would not wait for 4 years. Or were they? Such things are uncertain at best. There was one thing about it. The last cake was the finest. They had learned from the previous cakes. Besides, 4 of them were now skilled cooks, turning out menus every day for their growing families. And as great white cake, frilly beyond others, and packed with all the good things they could devise, as the cake was put away, there was a feeling shared by all that it would not be long before this one would come out to feel the cut of a wide-blade knife on a very happy day. But, as we also noted, no one can ever be certain of things to come in life. 1913 became history, and 1914. The Great War flared in Europe. The years piled upon each other. Several tried it, and it appeared that the cake would be cut most any week, but somehow it never happened. The teens came off the calendar, and the noisy, rowdy 20s filled the lives of the young women. Those who had not married were now professional women who were making lives for themselves. So in the 20s gave way to the 30s, unhappy years that were for the nation wallowing in the Depression. And the 40s came with their great war and modern miracles and national crises. And the cake, well, for some, it was all but forgotten. Some of the original 8 were now grandmothers. Mabel Whitney was long dead. Ola Hall was Hoquiam's competent city clerk, and Bess Dawes the county's juvenile officer. Sue Lenski taught at the junior high school. Phoebe Parker had moved away, but the cake, it still remains as a symbol of romantic dreams of 8 young, impressionable ladies with a grand idea. True, in the 37 years since it has been lovingly piled, tiered upon tier, glossed with the creamy white frosting, it has suffered a bit of remorseless time. Once stored in the bank vault, it lost its top layer to vandals with a taste for such a delicacy. But the other 2 are there. It would be easily finished with a new top layer. Ola Hall remarked the other day, admiring the still edible, still elegant cake that somehow still harbors of hope, of great deals of affection. 7 ladies whom I suspect of still being still young and quite romantic when they think of wedding cakes and traditions in their own lives. All right, George, it's time for a word from our sponsor. The great white fracased wedding cake that 8 Hoquiam High School girls dreamed of romantic dreams about is today locked safely away in a vault of the Hoquiam City Hall. Perhaps it will be yet to be cut at the orange blossom ceremonies, and perhaps another cake yet to be baked and readied for some future weddings. But I doubt it. For the years that so strongly shape our destinies have become too many and the odds too long. I don't know that there are any other plans for a cake, but I'd like to suggest one. Do you remember that bottle of wine that the company of Civil War veterans saved for the last man? It would not be out of keeping with the romantic beginning of this unusual cake if it were saved for the last of the 8 young ladies whose dreams and hopes and ambitions were all stirred into it, along with its less important ingredients. If the last living member of the octonation of 8 high school girls who meant to bake the cake in January of 1904 should cut the cake and serve it as a last gesture of a very romantic dream, a dream that makes a colorful story and fills tonight's pages in our hometown scrapbook, which in 2018 makes me wonder if that cake still exists or what happened to it. Thank you for listening.